Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another weather forecast by Aiden with the forecast, and it's going to be another update on Tropical Storm Sam, which obviously has just formed earlier today. So we are now ahead of 2005 by quite a while here. I believe we're ahead of 2005 officially by I believe it's 8 days now, because yesterday was 9 days, so I believe now it's 8 days now that Sam has officially formed. So in this video, we're going to be going over obviously Hurricane Sam, and obviously the likelihood for this becoming a major hurricane is really increasing. I'm going to be going through all that in the forecast and what strength it can get to, and whether it's going to impact or even just spare the Caribbean. So if you're in the Caribbean and you want to find out whether you're going to be safe or not, I recommend watching this whole video, and as well subscribing, smashing that like button, and bell icon. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So here's the overall looking at the National Hurricane Center. So there we have Tropical Storm Sam right now in the central MDR region. So it has a ton of water considering it's a slow mover. So right now I believe it's at 50 miles an hour, and it is at 50 miles an hour, 1,003 millibars. So basically it's already lower pressure than the CMC 12Z yesterday. So like I said, the 12Z CMC would not verify. So I do guarantee at this point the CMC is probably getting its way towards more of a GFS type track, but I'm not sure if that's actually true because I have not checked the CMC at all today, only GFS. So we will see. We'll find out together whether the CMC is going northwestward or not. But 1,003 millibars and going west at 16 miles an hour. Let's now go ahead and get a look at the overall discussion. So for those who don't remember, at 5 o'clock advisory yesterday, it became a tropical depression, and then just a few advisories later, it became Sam. So here's the overall forecast. So looking at a very intense peak forecast. Actually, in the first ever advisory, they forecasted a 115 mile an hour hurricane. This is actually the first time on the first ever advisory of a tropical depression that the National Hurricane Center has predicted a peak of Category 3. And that happened yesterday, so we are making history within Sam there, but a 125 mile an hour peak by the next 5 days or so. So watching out for a very intense storm, and this could very well become a Larry 2.0. And actually, there's a really good chance this probably may become stronger than Larry, as this could very well even can't be out of the question of becoming Category 4 out the sea storm. Thankfully, though, again, looking like it's gonna definitely completely spare the Caribbean by a long way. So due to the extreme strengthening forecast and overall extreme peak, likely to see again frequent eye wall replacement cycles, etc. This thing's gonna act together very quickly. It's already doing so as of now. So at this point, it's definitely not going to hit the Caribbean at this rate due to its rapid now. I mean, it's actually likely to obviously rapidly intensify very soon, but looking at a well-defined circulation has formed with peak winds of 44 knots on the north side of the vortex. So this thing is getting its really, really nice act together. It is noteworthy that this is the second earliest formation of the 18th named storm in the Atlantic Basin, moving ahead of 2005 hurricane season and only trailing last year. So, I mean, this thing is just a little bit behind last year. Obviously, last year at this time, I think we got to the very beginning of the Greeks, so we are not too far from 2020 either. So here's the overall structure now of Tropical Storm Sam, and it's looking a lot better. You can see the clear low pressure right there, a good convection burst blowing up. I mean, this storm is looking really, really good as well. You see just clear an outflow boundary, seeing obviously really good divergent cumulus cloud as well, kind of a divergent flow of those cirrus clouds, and that is representing an overall developing upper level anticyclone, as well as seeing potential developing outflow channel down here. We're seeing a lot of enhanced convection to the southeast quadrant, but it has really good obviously counterclockwise flow, which obviously is very visible, and obviously you can clearly see this really strong inflow right here, which is separating kind of the developing eye wall towards the banding itself and the outer bands. So likely to become a hurricane, probably I wouldn't doubt by tomorrow, mid early afternoon. I would not doubt it becomes a hurricane early as tomorrow. Again, likely to rapidly intensify. We're seeing as well even really intense convection into the northern banding. And obviously the most intense part of the storm is actually in that northern quadrant, which is where we're seeing right now a huge convection burst right now, with obviously around negative 70 to even negative 80 degrees Celsius. So seeing those really cold cloud tops, allowing for the overall initiation, and as well convection to continue to blow up. So here's the overall latest look now at ASCAT data, and this ASCAT data looks pretty overall good. I mean, we're seeing a clear, really strong developing eye wall right now. There's a northern axis of this system is where the strongest winds are, 40 knots, obviously, and 1,004 millibars is being supported as of the latest ASCAT pass. We are seeing extremely intense winds, though, across this overall eastern and northern quadrants, where we are seeing the most intense winds. You can kind of see on the wind vectors, we are seeing kind of more of those lines to the side indicating stronger winds, but we're as well as seeing some strengthening winds as well on the western quadrant and really intense, obviously, westerlies within the system. So it's fully closed, it's well defined, and it's continuing to strengthen right now. But as of now, the northeast and the northern quadrant is the strongest part. There's a low pressure right there with that lowest pressure of 1,004 millibars and obviously the calmest winds. Right now, we're not seeing much going on in the southern quadrant as of now. So as it continues to progress within its organization and rapid intensification, it's most likely to become a lot more symmetrical and a little bit less kind of just lopsided towards the north and south. So looking really good, though. Really strong shear or wind vectors, and obviously the strongest winds are now going towards the direction of going southwest, or kind of going kind of southwesterly as it kind of goes around the west side of that low pressure, but looking like a really good and well-defined strengthening low pressure. So here's now a look at the National Hurricane Center 11 o'clock advisory. Actually, no, I actually believe this is a 2 o'clock advisory. So here's a very, very small wind field centered just kind of specifically towards the north of the axis. So right now it's starting off as a very, very small wind field. And obviously it's really small starting off, as it's obviously just become a tropical depression not too long ago. I mean, at this time yesterday, it was still an imbus. And now it's a moderate and tropical storm heading to become a hurricane very soon. So likely to become a hurricane as basically as early as 8 o'clock Friday. But like I said, I wouldn't doubt if it becomes a hurricane as early as the mid to early afternoon hours based on this rate of overall organization. And obviously we don't actually get recon data till the 52.5 degree west, obviously 52.5 west there, west obviously in degrees. So we're not gonna have a recon go out till basically as early as a Monday. So we're going to really rely on ASCAT, really overall data, and just overall the overall organization and structure of the system. So by the structure, we can kind of get a better idea of how strong the storm is and whether it's organizing and whether it's kind of falling apart. And obviously with this overall organization, I've seen the past monitoring the past 12 hours, I wouldn't doubt if it gets to the rate to becoming 75 by as early as the 2 o'clock advisory. And then, of course, going to be a very, very slow mover due to the fact that it's getting steered mostly just by the trade winds and not by any ridge or any trough. Because obviously the only ridge, which I'll be going later into depth later on in the video, is way up there near Morocco. So very weak forcing with this. So it's going to go really slow. And it's going to be the big factor to why it's not going to absolutely become a massive threat towards the Caribbean. So as it moves very slowly in these almost perfect conditions, it's going to really rapidly intensify from a hurricane, then back to a major hurricane, so basically from Category 2 directly back to a Category 3, and then it's going to really steer northwestward because of this extreme strengthening phase. So even if the CMC verifies, it's still most likely going to just miss, but it's going to be a lot closer for call. But I really don't think we're going to be seeing too many effects necessarily for the Lesser Antilles, U.S. Virgin Islands, and even Puerto Rico, except for basically surf and rip current. Here's the overall looking at the most likely arrival time of tropical storm force winds, and none of these areas are even within a 5 to 10%, but obviously by tomorrow they most likely will, as it continues to cone expands obviously every single advisory. But since it's such a slow mover, it's going to take a while for us to get data, but of course only as of now an 80 to 90% chance, with a 90% obviously just in that low pressure, but going to continue to go towards the northwest, so likely to not become a big threat or even a concern for the Lesser Antilles. So if you're in the Lesser Antilles, if you are in Guadalupe, if you are in the U.S. Virgin Islands, if you're in the Windward Islands or Puerto Rico, I would not worry about this system, as not only with this huge, jump from 115 in the first advisory to now 125, that alone, although that number is very scary and intimidating, it's actually going to save, it's going to save you from having to prepare, because that number in miles an hour, that strength is going to be the reason why it misses your area. And I'll get, like I said, more into detail on why that is later in the video. So, of course, as you would guess, obviously common sense, the ensembles are obviously really jumping on the system quickly after the National Hurricane Center has obviously put out the first advisories just within 24 hours ago. 969 millibars now is the overall mean. But look at the overall majority of the malls getting a sub 970 millibars. So in an absolute monster storm, you can see the majority now are showing a lot less of these actually posing a threat to Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, and the majority now are taking it just within that mean and that black line. So it's going to be still obviously, some malls will be uncomfortably close, but still missing your area. Because for those who remember first few days ago, a ton of them were actually going, like, I mean, at least maybe 9 or 10 were taking it going to the Caribbean. And like I said, that wasn't going to happen, and now we're only to around 3 or 4 towards the Caribbean. But overall, the ensembles now and the overall computer models are jumping on this huge strengthening phase. Here's the overall now look at the tropical storm Sam model intensity guidance, and like I said, a category 4. I wouldn't rule out the possibility, but I definitely think it could very well, it could be within reach. But again, it's still not like something we should say this early on. But like I said, it's going to really rapidly intensify, basically just really going basically straight past category 1 and category 2 within a blink of an eye. I mean, the conditions are just perfect, and I'm about to go through the conditions after this slide here, but looking at obviously now at 50 miles an hour, and that's going to really strengthen now within 12 hours to become a hurricane. So like I said, it's basically actually 12 hours is basically in the morning, with a few getting within 24 hours. But like I said, it's most likely going to become a hurricane by the early or mid-afternoon, which is a little bit earlier than 8 o'clock, which 8 o'clock at night, obviously, tomorrow. It's going to go straight through Category 1 and Category 2, and now a ton of models are getting it towards Category 3, with around 2 getting it to a Category 4. And like I said, Category 4 cannot be ruled out of the possibility. Is it possible? Yes. I mean, the peak forecast is already 125 miles an hour, so it's not far from reach whatsoever from Category 4. So I'm going to keep a very close eye on this. I mean, really, I mean, we have a ton of malls now in Category 3. I mean, there were basically only a few yesterday, and that was including the H4, but now we are having a lot more greens. I mean, you can just see that extreme spike, and it's basically like COVID cases early on. They just really spiked. I mean, that's going to really be the big reason to why. Obviously, it's speed with the bridge not having much an impact on its actual cone and track. This is going to be the big reason why it's actually not heading to the Caribbean, because if the ridge was a lot closer and implying a lot more force, it'll be moving a lot faster and a lot more normal speed, because I believe the average speed is 14 miles an hour, and it's going to be moving way less than that. So again, they're a big thing towards why the conditions are almost perfect is this shear. I mean, this is looking at the overall shear forecast, and we are seeing basically within 5 to 10 knots. So look at all the greens. The greens basically signals favorable conditions for development. There's the overall storm right there. There is the tropical storm Sam. Obviously, this has a long way till it's actually getting anywhere close to the Lesser Antilles, and has all of this huge pocket of less than 10 knots of shear, and that it actually carries all the way from the surface to the upper levels at 200 millibars. So not only we're seeing weak surface shear, but as we go up into the atmosphere, into the lower stratosphere, we are still seeing that very low difference between shear. I mean, within 200 millibars, we're seeing less than 10 knots in the upper levels. So definitely really good conditions shear-wise. This is typically unseasonably low type of shear we're seeing. I mean, not only is it a small pocket, but this pocket is from all the way from Africa towards the actual Eastern Caribbean. So this is a massive pocket and a massive opportunity for Sam to get its act together and become a monster out to sea hurricane. As well as a result of the very warm water we're seeing here, 28.5 to 29 degrees Celsius waters across the central and east in the central and western MDR. Central and western MDR. We're seeing as well some pretty overall high ocean heat content within anywhere from 70 to 80 meters, all the way up to pockets of 125 meters of 80 degrees Fahrenheit water. So really actually pretty concentrated amount and enhanced amount of ocean heat content waters. So as the storm starts to move very slowly over this, it's going to really strengthen and go out to sea like that, and at this point it's going to get picked up by the trough and the jet stream and go up the obviously northern Gulf Stream very quickly. So as well, ocean heat content will be a pretty big factor, obviously with the speed and the ocean heat content kind of correlating together and complementing each other. That's going to be another big reason why the conditions are so good. So let's now go look now at the latest 12Z GFS model run. So here is what they actually have. So they're actually pretty far behind. Well, I wouldn't say pretty far behind, but they are definitely behind on Tropical Storm Sam, as they have it at 1,007 millibars right now. and obviously it's at 1003 and steeply declining with the overall pressure gradient we are noticing with developing here within the system already. And there as well, going to watch out for maybe a potential other MDR system with a wave and trough behind it. So right now, there's going to be low pressure somewhere deep in Africa. It's going to be a possibility, like I mentioned yesterday, before the AOI, because now there is a 30% AOI for the next 5 days off Africa, and I'll be showing you guys that after we look at SAM. But here's the overall look: 988 millibars quickly within 54 hours now. So at this point, it's still going to do westward because slow development, but once it starts going to those deeper ocean heat content waters, and overall still less than 10 knots a shear, it's going to really rapidly intensify, go as low as 965 millibars in the western MDR. Then at this point, I'm going to get 960, 958, 952, or 962. I thought that was 952 for a second. 957. They're 957, 957, 956. And this is the wave right behind it. There's the overall trough now. It's probably going to come out to sea by the next maybe 5, or no, this would be the next 4 days. So that's why the development is so low. But as well, watching out for a new wave to emerge off Africa within 4 days. And with the great conditions still left behind, this could very well become as well a possibility and possible new storm here. But look at 961 millibars. And then with this rate, probably as well going to just skin Bermuda here, as we see that really strong ridge to the north axis right here. You see a really strong and the really close isobars together. It's going to kind of bend that ridge at kind of just straight up north turn, instead of it kind of going like that, where it goes like that. It's going to actually get, again, with the ridge, it's going to go straight northward. So there is going to be a possibility for a threat towards Bermuda, but there was really no threat towards the Caribbean. So it's kind of weird to think that there's a bigger threat for Bermuda within this system than the Caribbean itself, when this is basically, it looks like it's heading straight for the Caribbean because it's a weak force from the high pressure all the way up here. So it's also a pretty weak high pressure. So with a really weak high pressure, you don't see the strong kind of out to sea like that, but you kind of see the westerly. So as it kind of goes westerly, with this high pressure being so far northeast and so weak overall, I mean, it's actually forcing, it's going to kind of just go over here. But with the easterlies, it's going to continue to take SAM basically at a west turn or a west steering until the SAM gets actually getting rapidly intensified. It's going to continue to go west, but once it goes over those really warm waters, it's going to really strengthen and go northwestward. Let's now see what the CMC says. I'm actually very intrigued what they say. The 12Z, I'm guessing they're probably I'm guessing based on the overall amount of time since the first advisory, I'm guessing the CMC maybe has been a little bit less aggressive with its distance within the Caribbean. So we're gonna find out by ourselves. So they still have, I mean, I don't know what the CMC is showing. I mean, it's already 1,003 millibars, and they have it as 1,009 millibars. So it looks like the CMC has not learned, but they are actually still, further away from the Caribbean. So that is, I guess, a sign of improvement. But the high pressure is a lot stronger, actually, off the coast of Morocco, or actually off the coast of Spain and Portugal. So it's gonna have a little bit more of a kind of a northern like that somewhat. So at this point, the CMC shows how high pressure having a little bit more of an influence. And then there it is, actually just getting Bermuda. So it's going to be like another like Larry type storm. Like it could be a threat to Bermuda, but we don't know till it actually gets like right within maybe like 100 miles. So if you're in Bermuda, that's the thing about being such a small island in the middle of nowhere, is that's really hard to tell far out, like big countries like Cuba, or even though Puerto Rico's small, it's kind of still a lot easier to forecast. Because look at Bermuda towards like Puerto Rico. I mean, even it's basically the size of like one of the Leeward Islands. But here's the overall vorticity on the European. So there you see, obviously, the wind vectors are facing towards the west there, because we are seeing the easterlies pushing it this way like that. So you can kind of see this tip, the very tail of the wind vectors are going towards the west, and that's because of those easterlies. And then you can see they start to shift now towards the northwest as the storm starts to strengthen again. This is look at the European. The European is showing as well a lot less of an aggressive approach. So it looks like the models are starting to kind of grasp on the overall strengthening. And there's the overall now European showing that new wave off Africa. So we're going to have to continue to watch out for more storms to come off the coast. And here's now a look at the H4. H4, of course, gonna have it get pretty intense. They're pretty similar with pressure, just 1 millibar off, and then they get it. Let's see here, 960 millibars within 72 hours, 954, 950. I mean, they are, of course, they're getting quite intense. I mean, 952 millibars cannot be ruled out. And let's not get into the overall steering patterns. Like I said, there's basically like no upper level winds or shear. I mean, look, this is 200 millibars, and there is less than 20 knots of shear. See, developing upper level anticyclone within the overall outflow channels. And again, this is a massive pocket. I mean, this is unseasonably weird and just unseasonably well below average. But as we continue now with the next few hours and the next few days, this continues to have a really strong and overall clear outflow channel with multiple, or clear upper anticyclone with multiple outflow channels. This again continue to leave pretty favorable conditions for the wave off Africa, which is soon to come off within 3 or 4 days. I mean, look at this really strong upper level anticyclone. I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful example of upper level anticyclone right here. I mean, we have outflow channels across this whole system. I mean, this is basically 4 channels right there. 4 channels. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. 4 channels like that. We have 4 outflow channels with this upper level anticyclone. So although it doesn't really need the upper level anticyclone, the only shear actually created within the upper levels will be because it's strong spin. As well, we're going to be seeing the actual shear itself move within the same direction of this system. So it's actually going to strengthen the storm even more. So although there's very weak shear, the only shear that's kind of left will actually generate the storm even further more because it's moving within the same direction. So that's actually going to help promote more strengthening. You kind of see it's kind of going the same direction. And then, of course, it's going to continue to go out to sea and then get picked up by a trough. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.